So a little something different. I mean, not much different. We still have a crime here, but instead of it being against a teenage girl who has gone missing or who has been murdered, we've got a teenage girl doing the murdering. Can we be honest? Teenagers in general are scary. Not all of them, but some of them. Maybe most of them. Anyway, we've seen even recently in present times a teen girl killing a member of her family for getting up in her business, telling her what she can and can't do, searching her room. I'm thinking of the present case of Carly Gregg. But this case today happened 100 years ago this month. Our subject today is 16-year-old Dorothy Ellingson of San Francisco, who killed her ma, shooting her to death, and fleeing the scene. Where did she flee to? Well, we'll get to that. Why did she do it? Well, let's hear it from her own mouth. Quote, "Yes, I killed Mother. I killed her because she upbraided me for going out with men. I told her I was going out Tuesday night and she said I should not. We had an awful quarrel. Then I got my brother's gun and shot her." End quote. Well, I guess we don't need to worry about trying to get a confession. Teenage girls, I was one once. We don't seem to have all of our brain cells functioning properly. Speaking for myself, though, I was a goody two-shoes. A crush on a guy would envelop our thoughts to the point of extreme distraction, pushing the boundaries of our parents, throwing tantrums, sneaking out, which I didn't do. We lived virtually in the middle of nowhere. But teenage girls, teenage anyone, vulnerable part of the population, which is why I tend to report on them more. The lack of brain cells, too many hormones, and the desire for independence tend to lead to some bad decision making. And yeah, girls were getting married at 16 or even younger back in these days. My grandmother and her sister each got married at about 16, namely to stop working on their father's dairy farm, but there you go. And others got married because their parents couldn't afford to keep them, get out and work or get married, or because they just wanted to be out on their own, out from under their parents' thumb. So we have Dorothy, who tag-nabbit was going to go out with the boys to men and get her drink on come hell or high water. I guess she chose hell, huh? As you can maybe guess, this huge quarrel wasn't the first. It wasn't an anomaly. It wasn't a one-time thing. Dorothy was pushing the boundaries against her parents frequently, to the point where Dorothy's father, Joseph, actually left the family over Dorothy's pushing. Dorothy's ma, Anna, had been defending Dorothy up to this point, but when her husband cut family ties, Anna began to see his point. And that's where Dorothy was not having it, particularly when Dorothy had caught Anna calling policewoman Sullivan on the phone about having something done with Dorothy. Anna informed Dorothy that, quote, things had come to a showdown, end quote. The night before, Anna had refused to let Dorothy attend a party at a beach resort. The girl had insisted on going, and I guess Anna decided to again inflict some corporal punishment. Dorothy resisted, and I think this was the triggering incident for Anna to contact the police. Perhaps for Dorothy to be sent to reform school or something? And I guess Dorothy, seeing the jig was up, that she was being reported by her mother to police, she went into her brother's room, grabbed the gun he kept there, shot her mother in the back of the head while Anna was bending over and tying her shoes, packed some dresses in a suitcase, grabbed all the money she could find, including her dead mother's $45, and went out to find a party. After the murder, Dorothy fled to a rooming house where she got a room, went to the house with a guy where she, quote, went to a party where we had drinks and something to eat, end quote. Apparently the next night, following the murder of her mother, she went to see a crime movie. And then at the tip of two of her boyfriends, the police went and arrested her. If you think this sounds pretty freaking callous, you shot your mother to death and then you head to a party. If you find her lack of care disturbing, well, be prepared to be disturbed for a while. The girl does not seem to care about your feelings. And she seems unfazed to have been charged with murder. Along with her arrest, the police have warrants out for like 17 young men who are going to be charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. They've rounded up 3 so far, all of whom are musicians. Dorothy's father, Joseph, and brother Earl would go visit her in jail. Her brother, ticked at his sister, understandably, for killing their mother, would say when she tried to hug him, quote, "Don't touch me, you killed our mother," end quote. Her response, quote, "My God, go away. Don't you know I can't talk to you? Why do you come to me like this?" End quote. Her family left, and here returns her party smile, according to the newspaper. At the request of reporters and photographers at the jail, she would write on-demand poetry. And her brother would suggest she should be hanged. Her fellow prisoners seem also unimpressed. So let's back up a bit to get a broader view of things that led up to the matricide. So as mentioned, many quarrels about Dorothy's lifestyle. Dorothy's father had it with what Dorothy was doing, and he actually left the home. Mainly, I would guess, because his wife Anna would not support him, and she would actually defend Dorothy. Anna, the ma, 47 years old, and deemed to be old-fashioned and a bit strict. Dorothy apparently would point this out frequently to her mother when Anna would call out her daughter for staying out late and for the company she kept. When talking tos wouldn't work, Anna would be a bit harder with her punishment. Was Dorothy all party? No, she enjoyed reading Alfred Lord Tennyson's poems and aestheticism. But the lure of bright lights, all-night dances, car rides, and gin parties was too much of an allure. What else was the allure? What this girl would become known for. Jazz, baby. Jazz in this day and age seemed to be the lifestyle that was corrupting mainly young women, if you believe the newspapers. Dorothy's diary would reveal her inner thoughts. Quote, July 10. Mother is dreadfully old-fashioned and strict. Why won't she even let me go to the movies with other girls? July 15. Mother whipped me when she found out I had gone to a dance instead of to Ruth's house. But it was worth it. July 18th. Guess I'm out of luck when boyfriends can't even call on me at our house. August 23rd. Met H and K, had a fine feed. Nice fellows. This is the life. Wonderful time. Pep, jazz, gin. Went to the beach later and got drunk. August 24th. Out on a hot time party with Ben and the gang. When it was all over, I was all in. August 29th. Another whipping, but stayed home. Won't stand for another one. Will do as I please henceforth and love where I please. Tuesday, another auto ride and lots of drinks. Big time. Lots of love, too. End quote. Oh, dear. Dorothy, it is feared, may try to take her own life as she's held in jail. Policewoman Sullivan is staying with her in her cell to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's some chit-chat about how to handle her eventual court case. She won't hang because of her age. This is like today, where you can't get the death penalty if you committed a crime as a minor under 18. But she could get life in prison if the case is retained by the Superior Court instead of under the Juvenile Court. District Attorney Brady interviewed Dorothy and would say this, quote, "It is the first case of the kind on record in this state that I know of. Her youth, the circumstances surrounding the killing are all unusual," end quote. Those 17 men under warrant, Dorothy's happily laying the blame on them, except for one. Quote, "They are just as guilty of this as I. They started me and kept me going on the way to this. Keith was a gentleman, different from the others," end quote. Keith Lord was one of the 3 already under arrest. He plays the banjo. What would Keith Lord say about Dorothy? Quote, "Bright lights and plenty of liquor. That seemed to be her ambition, life and booze," end quote. Dorothy also seemed to have a different last name of Rouse or Roos when around her party pals. Quote, "She told him she did the shooting, did she? Well, it's too bad. I knew her in Frisco. I knew that she was nutty about wild parties and nightlife with lots of liquor, but I never knew she was the kind to do any shooting. I met her when I was working at the new Shanghai case, just on the border of Chinatown, and was introduced to her by Harry Chinitz, another musician. She told me she was 19 and she looked the part. Sophistication was written all over her. We went out to places several times, she and I learned very soon her idea of life was the bright lights and plenty of liquor. That seemed to be her ambition, life and booze. She told me her mother was dead and that she lived with friends by the name of Ellingson. Yes, it is true that the police found a letter from me in which I offered to send her money for her fare to Los Angeles. And I wrote it because she wrote first and said she was going to leave San Francisco and come here. As far as any love affair is concerned, there's nothing to that. In fact, we weren't even good friends. I knew her. That's all. End quote. Miss Stella Miner, director of the Girls Security League of America and well-known welfare worker, would say this about Dorothy. Quote, the Dorothy Ellingson case is the worst I have ever heard of, more shocking by far than any of the 30,000 I have handled. I have studied girls who were thieves, moral degenerates, and criminals of the lowest type. But this case is beyond my comprehension. The girl evidently was carried away by her primitive instincts. Her desires were those of a girl of 16, but her mind was that of a 6-year-old. Probably she would have shot her mother when prevented from carrying out any intense desire. End quote. Does Miss Miner blame Jazz? Quote, no, society is to blame. If society did its full share in welfare work, it would get hold of these girls before they get into trouble. We should find out and take care of their difficulties before it is too late. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Girls don't become wicked all at once. Dorothy Ellingson must have been in trouble before. At the first sign that she is delinquent or feeble-minded, a girl should be placed where she cannot get into more serious difficulties. Psychological examinations should be given in all grades of school for pupils whose mentality is low. This is now being done in several grammar schools and high schools in New York State. The child who is unmistakably a moron or a degenerate should be placed in the colony for the feeble-minded and kept there for life. We have done this with quite a few boys and girls in New York State, but unfortunately the parents invariably want to have their children home for Christmas, or for some such reason, and will make every effort to get them out of the institution. End quote. Yikes. Now, her father and brother, with the passage of a few days, would start to ease their fury at Dorothy. Joseph and Earl would say they would retain a lawyer for her. Her response, quote, I won't have their old lawyer, end quote. Instead, she's relying on a public defender. Joseph and Earl would visit her, and Earl, her brother, would say, quote, you killed Mother, Dorothy, but last night it seemed as if Mother appeared to me while I slept and said, stand by our dear Dorothy. I'm going to do it, end quote. Dorothy would say at the coroner's inquest to reporters, quote, they can kill me or put me in prison for life, but I can't stand this torture any longer. I don't care what they do to me now, end quote. Public Defender Egan, quote, as she has requested, I will handle her case, and there will be no array of alienists and scientists. The county has no money to employ these, and if I'm going to defend Dorothy, there must be no defense fund. That is true because I am permitted to handle only the cases of persons without funds, end quote. Egan is not showing his hand yet. We haven't even gotten to the preliminary hearing yet, but family mental illness is being looked into. Joseph Ellingson, the father, quote, Earl and I will do what we can, but we insist Dorothy tell the truth. We believe she has done so up to this time, and during her trial, we want the whole truth without her attempting to hide anything, end quote. Ministers everywhere are jumping on sheiks and jazz mania as why all this happened. Home training was urged as a safeguard against so-called pleasure palaces. Good luck with that. By January 21st, we have a change in attorneys to Alexander Muslin, as it's decided if she will go to Superior Court or stay in juvenile court. Apparently, Dorothy's nickname on the circuit was Peppy Jazz Baby Dot, which is a really long nickname. She would say prior to her hearing, quote, I'm glad I'm looking better and that my hair and dress look good too. I am more sure of myself and can face that mob better if I look all right, end quote. As you can imagine, she is receiving all kinds of letters in prison, some congratulating her on her deed, that she now doesn't have anyone to nag at her. Another horrific one arrived accompanied by a rope which was intercepted by police that told her if she had courage to off her mother, she could off herself. Jeez. But then another one, which I think was telling and may provide food for thought, or not, quote, I know something of the world myself. I've never touched liquor, but I have been kissed, and once I stayed out late at night. But I am paying dearly for my folly. I'm helping mother now. Work is my means of making amends. Perhaps you too may follow my example and find peace of mind. End quote. January 29th. Well, maybe things are starting to sink in. She would give a message to the girls of America and a statement to Reverend Phillips, her former Sunday school teacher. Quote, obey your parents. Keep away from jazz. Shun sheiks. Make religion a part of your life. End quote. January 30th, it was decided that she had to stand for trial for murder in the Superior Court, not go to the way of a potentially easier sentence in juvenile court. She's moving to Ingleside Jail from the city prison. Apparently, though, interestingly, officers testified that they had not told her before she confessed that anything she might say could be used against her. Whoops. That's a no-no, but will not prevent this trial from moving forward, it appears, may just result in some investigation to police investigation tactics. I will say now that nothing really comes up about this later where it affected the trial. January 31st. Defense has stated when we go to trial that Dorothy will not take the stand and that she is entering a plea of not guilty. Winslow, her main attorney, will bring in a doctor to testify to her mental condition. March 1925. Starting to look for a jury. See that headline about wanting an all-male jury? The defense wants that because history has told us, in at least the handful of cases I've done about women killers, the women who murdered have for the most part been acquitted. Now, in this case, there is no chance that Dorothy can be given the death penalty because of her age at the time of the crime. However, she could be given life in prison. Male jurors, perhaps, would be hesitant to do that because here's a young girl who would be forced to go to prison for the rest of her life. But what is interesting, we have the possibility of female jurors now, and the defense does not want that. Why? Well, I'm not quite sure because they don't outright say in the newspapers, but I'm going to assume the defense feels that women would not have quite the same feelings as men do about putting a girl like Dorothy in prison for life, especially one that killed her mother, which one of these female jurors could be moms themselves. Anywho, the temporary insanity defense will be used, and they intend to call every type of doctor just about to testify. The state, of course, says she's sane now and was sane then at the time of the murder. The state also has secured its own psychiatrist to be used against the defense. As the jury is being picked, which is taking a few days, Dorothy has had her fourth collapse in court in 3 days. Her father is questioning her ability to be able to withstand the court proceedings. Now, we're only in the jury questioning, which she is present for, and this questioning is apparently causing her some issues. She fell into dead faints twice at the conclusion of court for that day. She collapsed at being photographed, and another was when the name of her mother was mentioned. March 26th. Judge Lauterbach, on day 4 of the jury selection, has said to the attorneys on both sides that everyone is staying late until the jury is secured by 5 o'clock that afternoon. Well, it's the next day. We're still looking for jurors. And then finally, we have our jury. 9 men, 3 women, and 2 alternate jurors who are female. March 28th. D.A. Brady state that he would welcome a plea of guilty to murder in the second degree. If she pleads to that, this is all over. Her attorney, Winslow, is offering the court that she could plead guilty to manslaughter, and it's all over. Public sentiment basically wants this over with. D.A. Brady, quote, we are not responsible for protracting this case. That responsibility rests entirely on the shoulders of the defense. The defense desires to end this case, they can do so immediately. All that the defense needs to do is enter a plea of guilty to murder in the second degree. That is the lowest degree of murder that fits the case. If they did this, the district attorney legally could agree to such a plea. End quote. Defense attorney Muslin, quote, "The district attorney knows that we could not and should not allow our client to plead guilty to a degree of murder when all the evidence will show under the law that the charge should be manslaughter. Long ago, in good faith, we went to the district attorney and offered to interpose a plea of guilty of manslaughter charges. That offer stands," end quote. We still have some story to tell, so I'm going to zip through this a bit. Alienists for the defense are stating that Dorothy is one, quote, "who not alone was insane at the time of the alleged crime, but is insane now," end quote. The defense is motioning to dismiss the panel of jurors who are here for a murder trial and to get another jury together to discuss and hear about her mental issues. The judge has sent out the jury to discuss the issues with attorneys. March 31st, Judge Louderback has adjourned the murder trial until April 6th, which then will change to a sanity hearing with a new jury. Dorothy, who faints, quote, "almost hourly," end quote, according to one newspaper, resents the question of her sanity. April 1st. Yes, it's April Fool's Day and is also Dorothy's birthday. No further comment. She is now 17. She told one of the doctors allegedly that she is sane and would rather plead guilty than to be found insane and sent to an asylum. Well, no. Anyway, in an interesting twist, because this is now an insanity hearing, the burden of proof goes to the defense instead of prosecution. So her family is being questioned as to Dorothy's self. Her lawyer, Muslin, is going to try to say that this started prenatally. When 3 months before Dorothy was born, Dorothy's mother had tried to choke Dorothy's father in the middle of the night to kill him as he slept, and then she fell to hysterics on the floor. How the family has moved around quite a bit before settling in San Francisco, how she started kindergarten when she was 6 and was irregular in school and was truant even then. How Dorothy ran away from home with another girl at the age of 12 to hang out with 2 soldiers, and she slept in a boxcar. How she formed intimate acquaintances with men who had nicknames like Goof and Frenchie. How Dorothy had no moral or religious training and her father had removed himself from the family home about a year earlier. Her attorney, Mr. Muslin, quote, "This unfortunate mother frequently tried in a friendly way to restrain her. The girl never threatened her mother. There was no real quarrel between them. The girl's only threats were that she would run away from home. We will show that this killing was the act of an insane person. Experts will show that this girl never has comprehended the proceedings here, that she has refused to cooperate with her attorneys, and is incompetent to defend herself on this charge of murder." End quote. Another act of incompetence? He alleges when she told an alienist that she would rather plead guilty, that should be considered an act of incompetence. Dorothy's brother Earl would say that she, quote, "would mumble to herself," end quote, would run away from home. She had run away to another town, and he and their mother had to go fetch her. Dorothy attended business college and held jobs at times, but her life had no seemingly schedule. Absent from home, having late hours, going to parties, and she's continuing to faint. But she would say this, quote, "I'm sure they can't prove me crazy, for I'm not. I'm just as sane as any other girl, only I've gone ahead and lived my life as I wanted to. After this is over, I want to get the murder trial out of the way as quickly as possible," end quote. April 7th. State presents their case, and of course they are going whole hog on Dorothy being sane, and Dorothy is practically all but rooting for the state to win. She actually hasn't collapsed in 3 days. She also interrupted her own counsel several times and threw a cup of water at attorney McAtee and threatened to poke him for telling lies about her. You're not helping your sanity case. So what do you think happened? She was found insane by the jury 11-1 after like 45 minutes of deliberation. She reportedly fainted at the verdict and became a bit hysterical. The lone dissenter was a gentleman, retired shoe dealer, who believed her sane. She'll now be committed to the State Hospital for the Insane in Napa. Once determined to be sane, the murder trial will commence. She will have a sanity test within 30 days after observation at the hospital. Before we get to trial number 2 of the murdering sort, let's talk psychology. This is one of the things that most interests me about true crime. Professor M.V. O'Shea at the University of Wisconsin, quote, "Our roadhouse type of life, the dangerous Freudian psychology that preaches unrestraint, lurid motion pictures, the noise of cities, all are joining to produce a nervous instability in youth that borders on and leads directly to emotional insanity. Dorothy Ellingson, the jazz-mad girl matricide of San Francisco, is a byproduct of the age with the brakes let loose. Our young men's and young women's overindulgence leads directly to nervous instability, then to a lack of enthusiasm for the ordinary things of life and for life itself, and finally, to suicide or insanity. Freudian psychology that is being so widely accepted by our youth encourages looseness and is one of our greatest dangers. Noise, such as fills our cities, produces a tension in the nervous system of human beings that has the same harmful effect as wild social life. The only remedy is to slow down." End quote. Now, at this point in time, the famous case of Leopold and Loeb was still fresh on everyone's mind, and people keep trying to compare their psyches to Dorothy's, as they too were on the young side of criminal activity. Now, another thing that's interesting to me, what would Dr. O'Shea think about the lives of people, particularly teenagers, 100 years into the future? Now. He would say, quote, "Parental discipline, paddling of children, exemplary behavior of the fathers and mothers will not alone solve the problem. Children will not obey parents. It is a problem of the community only. America has raced faster in the last 20 years than ever before. Its people are more high-strung than any other nation on earth, and it is the nation as a whole that must get down to brass tacks and slow down." End quote. Wow. And we definitely didn't listen to that as a country over the last century. We're jumping to May 21st. What's happening? Dorothy's being deemed sane and is being returned to the county jail from the asylum. And now it's time to prepare for the murder trial. Again. And Dorothy is working on her defense and is going back to the story, the very initial story that few heard about. That one Jimmy, a dope fiend, had shot and killed her mother. Yeah, well, now they're looking for this Jimmy to at least figure out what the fricky frack is going on. Anywho, she's keeping her plea of not guilty. Quote, "I didn't kill my mother. Jimmy Lamar did it. I thought I had to protect him, but now I see I was wrong and will tell the whole story. No, I don't think I'll faint anymore." End quote. Lamar is supposedly a jazz friend who came to her house the morning of January 13th and killed Dorothy's mother after a quarrel. Prosecution is probably rolling their eyes. June 6th. Trial was supposed to start soon, but we have a continuance until August. She has appendicitis and will need an operation. July 1925. The only news is that she has decided to join the Catholic Church and was baptized with the agreement of the court. August 11th. Dorothy is back in court for the trial. Her thoughts? Quote, "I want a home. I want a family. From jail, I've learned that home, with its sewing, its meals, its housekeeping, must give the greatest joys in life. I never had a real chance to live that sort of life, and I want it now." End quote. August 14th, the dueling confessions. Her confession that she killed her mother versus her confession at the state hospital that a dope fiend killed her mother. Defense is interviewing police that the police hadn't bothered to find this fiend, even though her very, very, very first initial confession was regarding this fiend. I'll say now, the dope fiend story does not seem to fly with anyone. We're still going to bring in the insanity in defense as well, even though she was deemed sane in the state hospital, which is why she's now at trial again. I guess this is insanity at the time of the crime rather than insanity now? Or serenity now? Joseph, Dorothy's pa, has already told the police department's juvenile home division that if Dorothy gets acquitted, quote, "In the event of an acquittal, it is my desire that Dorothy Ellingson be found delinquent as a minor and that she be confined in a reform school in this state until she reaches the age of 21. End quote. We're moving through this trial. Nothing new to see here. It's August 22nd, and she has been found guilty of manslaughter. The first girl in California to ever have to face a jury on a mother murder charge. Not something you want to frame and put on your wall. The jury took about 13 and a half hours to consider the charge, to which she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Dorothy is a different defendant this time. No fainting. She apparently expressed no emotion. The defense would say, quote, "We would have agreed to this verdict 6 months ago. In fact, we offered to allow this defendant to plead guilty to manslaughter," end quote. The penalty for manslaughter is 1 to 10 years with possibility of parole after 1 year, so we'll be doing the sentencing soon to see what she could actually get. Post-verdict, she would say, quote, "It was a vindication. The jury found that I am sane and they believe that I never intended to do what I did. That's what manslaughter means," end quote. Her lawyer, Mr. McGovern, will ask that the sentence be suspended and that Dorothy be sent to reform school until she's 21, which is what her pa wants too. However, she would say, quote, "I guess the reform school isn't the place for me after all. I've associated with a lot of people here in the jail since I was arrested, but whatever the judge does will be all right. He was very fair to me," end quote. One of the female jurors would say that they all agreed the killing was not premeditated and was without malice, but at first could not agree that she was entirely irresponsible, in other words, insane. I think it took until the 5th ballot to get to not considering the insanity defense. As she looks forward, she says, quote, "I'm young yet," end quote. Now, if you think she's turned the tide and is now more mature, well, it may be the writing of the newspapers and emphasizing the annoying teen stuff, but this one talks about her being on the stand and tossing her head at the judge and chewing gum. So anyway, she will go to prison at San Quentin. If she does very well, she could be released after a year. If she serves a full sentence, she will be released after 6+ years if she gets good behavior. Sentencing always confuses me. Anywho, August 31st. Dorothy's last taste of freedom for the time being was shut on her today with the closing of the prison gates. She was escorted in by the prison matron to begin processing. April 1926. Dorothy must serve 10 years at San Quentin, the maximum sentence for the crime for which she was convicted. She will not be eligible for parole until she has served at least half of her sentence and could shorten the sentence with good behavior. See why this always confuses me? Perhaps it's the newspaper's fault for not reporting things accurately. I don't know. August 1927. Dorothy has written her attorney, Mr. Muslin, a letter. Quote, "I see where I have erred, and I'm paying dearly for my wrongs. With the help of God, I am looking forward to a glorious future after I have finished my prison term." End quote. May 1929. This was odd to me until I remembered what her conviction actually was. She would be allowed to share in the estate of her mother, getting about $1,100. Since her conviction was manslaughter and not murder, she was entitled to the money. Okie dokie. December 1929, Dorothy was refused parole for what appears to be the second time. March 30th, 1931, she's been denied parole again, and apparently people are now finally seeing tears in her eyes. 1932, Dorothy was released on good behavior from San Quentin February 29th, 1932, after serving 6.5 years, less than the 10 years she was sentenced. She was born on April Fool's Day, released from prison leap year. She returned to San Francisco begging reporters for, quote, "the world to forget about me and leave me alone," end quote. She's now 23. She told Mrs. Black, the prison matron who accompanied her, quote, "Please forget me. I studied during these long years. I want to live a different life," end quote. She had earned $71.62 in the prison mills and took that with her and entered a family home where she was to meet her father and brother. Both now live in Washington. 1933. Well, just when you think, okay, she'll be fine now, she's righted her wrong. It's been a year. Well, her father had remarried, and after she had been released, he offered her a home in Washington, but she thought that her presence would bring back old wounds, and she looked elsewhere. A few months ago, she actually became a stenographer for her defending counselor, Mr. Muslin. But no. March 6th, Dorothy, going under a different last name, was arrested and booked on the charge of grand theft, accused by a former roommate, a Miss Ellis, of stealing jewelry and clothing valued at $600. Miss Ellis's stolen items were found under Dorothy's bed. She has an attorney, Brown, for this as her defense, and he would state, quote, "I'll walk out of the case if she says one word," end quote. She kept quiet. Perhaps finally understanding the weight of her deeds, Dorothy was found in her apartment after being released on bail with a hose from the open gas jet in her mouth. Neighbors had noticed the odor of gas coming from the apartment, and doctors were called immediately. She was treated, and doctors said she should recover. So what would happen? Miss Ellis dropped the charges. Quote, "I couldn't bear to send her back to prison. I want to give her a fresh start in life." End quote. An incredibly generous gesture, and I hope Dorothy understood the full weight of that gift. Now, if the information I found was correct, it looks like she did start anew. She changed her first name, got married, and had at least 2 kids. Beyond that, I don't know, and I didn't look. So what do you think of today's story? Bit of a change of pace, and may have some more different changes of pace in the upcoming future. See you.